Hey everybody, this is Russ Story, with Story Wealth Management Group. This is our radio program. We're recording this. We pre-recorded on WDMG. This runs on Thursdays at 11 o'clock. And please join us. And this will be aired this Thursday. Also in Tallahassee, it's on Wave 94. And you can check us out at 5 o'clock drive time in Tallahassee on Wave 94. So I'm about to get cooking with the radio show here. Give me just a second. We're going to get started. All right. This is Russ Story, your host for Money Matters. Thanks for joining us today. We have a really big show for you. We have a couple things we want to cover, and we're excited about being here today. I hope everybody's had an excellent week. Hope everybody's looking forward to a wonderful, happy, fun-filled weekend. I hope you got jingle in your pocket, you got some money to spend, and hopefully you'll have a good time this weekend, and probably it's well-deserved. I know a lot of folks, a lot of us, we stay after it. We work pretty hard, and speaking of hard work, a lot of times it amounts to having some money, and if you work hard and you're smart, and you've been able to put some money aside. I'm going to talk a little bit about investing today. I'm going to talk about risk management today. On our show today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the parable of the talents. We're going to go back and talk about some things that the Bible teaches, I believe, concerning the parable of the talents and what Jesus was talking about as part of his Sermon on the Mount and other parables that he used. You know, it's a funny thing about the Bible. It talks about money a lot more than it talks about heaven. And obviously, my belief is, especially based on the work that I do for people, obviously that the good maker looks at our talents, our money, as being pretty important. So we're going to cover that. First of all, I want to make sure you know who you're dealing with. This is Russ Story. I am president of Story Wealth Management in Douglas, Georgia. Our phone number is 912-384-0030. You can check us out on the website at storywealth.com. Send me an email. We get an awful lot of emails from our listeners, and we always enjoy reading your comments, concerns, and questions. The things that we talk about on the radio program here and Money Matters, we talk about things that come up in our day-to-day conversations and talks with our clients, our awesome, beloved, very, very special, deeply loved clients of Story Wealth Management Group. So hang with me. We're going to talk a little bit about some things. We're going to talk about risk, what's happening with the market. I want to talk to you just quickly about one of the important indicators that we look at that historically has done a pretty good job at predicting the economy. Now, you know, if you hear something today and you think it might apply to you, you're concerned about it, I'd encourage you, don't try to implement these things on your own. I'd encourage you, go talk to whomever your financial advisor may be, talk to them about your situation, and make sure that some of the things that I talk about, strategies, concepts, make sure that it makes sense for you to consider an implementation of this before you try to go out and do it on your own. That's certainly my recommendation. What I talk about, it's my opinion pretty much, and the investment firms that I represent, do business with, are not necessarily is it their opinion. So this is mine. So one of the things that we've noticed over the years, going back and looking, there's something called a yield curve. And the yield curve is commonly known as the difference, basically, between the long-term bond interest rates and short-term bond interest rates. So in other words, if you've got a 2-year treasury and a 30-year treasury, and the 30-year maturity treasury is much higher than the 2-year treasury, that difference, if you plotted them on a graph, that's called a yield curve. And that's kind of the difference between, and that slope between what a short-term interest and long-term interest is. Well, an inverted yield curve is something that you hear sometimes, but it rarely occurs historically. But it's when the short-term rates are up higher than long-term rates. So that's kind of backwards than the norm. So, in other words, if you plotted this on a chart, short-term dot would be up high and long-term would be down lower than that. That would be what's called an inverted yield curve. Now, historically, in my opinion, when that happens, looking at the empirical evidence, we have a recession or a slowdown in the economy. When you have a recession, slowdown in the economy, typically you're going to have the market, the stock market particularly, is not going to reflect an expanding economy. Consequently, it has a tendency to go down. So that has been a pretty good indicator of the stock market direction over the years. Now, right now we have a yield curve that's not inverted. But it's not necessarily normal in my opinion. It is flat. We have a flat yield curve, and when you have a flat yield curve, the next thing, if it continues and those long-term rates begin to go down anymore, in other words, one of the things that we keep hearing from the Federal Reserve and the folks on CNBC is that the economy is clicking along and everything's going okay. And the Federal Reserve is talking about raising short-term interest rates. Well, that's good. And, of course, the stock market has responded. You know, my fearless forecast, I keep talking about, I believe the Dow Jones Industrial Average will hit somewhere around 23,000. I believe it'll hit 23,000 before the end of the year. So I'm not looking for a recession. But one of the things I'm pointing out is that yield curve is an issue that maybe we want to keep an eye on. Now, it's been over 9 years since we've had a pullback as defined by a bull market in the stock market out here. I want to encourage you, don't be fooled. I talk about this just about every week because I think it's extremely important. You know, everybody wants to make hay when the sun shines. Everybody wants to make a lot of money when everybody else is making a lot of money. But you know, my grandmother used to have a saying, and I think it applies to us when it comes to our investment dollars, our 401k. It ain't what you make, Russ. It's what you keep. And I find a lot of truth to that. I've always found truth to that, and I believe that she's right. So, you know, making money is wonderful, but if you don't have anything to show for it after you've made it and you turn around and lose it, you really hadn't done anything. So I'd encourage you, if you have a financial advisor now, or if you're concerned about risk, I'm telling you, hear me now, believe me later, I believe strongly that now is the time to look at your portfolios. Make sure that you understand the risks that you may be looking at and faced with. Because 2008, folks lost an awful lot of money. 2000, folks lost an awful lot of money. And I can go on and on. You know, bear markets don't go straight up. Trees don't grow to the sky. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I'd encourage you, have a second opinion run. If you're with a firm that says, don't worry about it. Things may go down, but they always go back up. If you're getting close to retirement, if you're within 5 years of retirement, you need to address this issue of risk. Mathematically, it can be devastating to you in trying to draw a retirement income when the time comes that you retire. I'd encourage you, go on our website. Hopefully, we're doing our summer tour. Okay, we're coming to a town near you. So go into our website, storywealth.com, sign up for one of our seminars, and come sit down with us. You know, we'll make friends, I promise you. We're pretty good folks, okay? We'll have a good time. We'll have a little time together. We're going to share with you a lot of good information that we think is important, that we also talk to our beloved, awesome, greatest people in the world clients about at the office, and I think giving you a chance. So go to events section, go in and look at where we're going to be. We're going to be in, Perry, Florida, Tallahassee, Florida, St. Simons Island, Georgia. We'll be in Tifton, Georgia. We'll be in Douglas, Georgia. But go in there and take a look at the places we're going to be. Go in and send us an email or sign up for that seminar. Say, save me a place, Russ. I want to try those hot cookies that you talk about all the time, those awesome chocolate chip cookies with nuts in them that have oatmeal in them, and man, I look forward to seeing you and sharing a cookie with you. That'd be great. So come see us. Okay, and if you have trouble getting on the website, give us a call, 912-384-0030. Send me an email, rstory, that's for Russ Story, RSTORY, at storywealth.com. Okay, and we'll talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. Every now and again, I want to get back and talk about a biblical truth and make sure that folks understand where I'm at concerning some of the things that we deal with every day. Also, I think there's some lessons here that we need to look at as far as our money management and our time management and the things that we give over to God as Christians. And there's a parable of the talents I mentioned earlier, and the parable of the talents is one of the stories Jesus told to teach a moral lesson. Okay, and although the word talent in the story refers literally to money, and it does, you can obviously extend the meaning to other areas as well, I believe, when you're looking at stewardship that we as Christians are called to do. So here's the story, and we all have heard this, but I want to go over it with you, and let's hit some high marks. It was like a man. He went on a journey, and he called his servants and entrusted his property to them. And to one he gave 5 talents of money. To another he gave 2 talents of money. And to the other he gave 1 talent of money, each according to his ability. So when he went on his journey, the man who received the 5 talents went at once, and he put the money to work, and he gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 talents gained 2 more. And the man that had received 1 talent went off, he dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master came back, the servants returned and settled their accounts. The man who received the 5 talents brought the other 5, said, "Master, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I've gained 5 more. The master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things, and I put you in charge of many things. Come share your master's happiness." The man with 2 talents came. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I've gained 2 more." His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things, and I'll put you in charge of many more. So come and share your master's happiness." The man who received 1 talent came. "Master," he said, "I knew you were a hard man, and harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and hid your talent in the ground. So here is what belongs to you." The master replied, "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so at least the return I would have received back with some interest. Take the talent from him, and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has, will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Now, this is a simple story, but I think it makes some very interesting points. And as a Christian, I have struggled with some of these things. And I think many of you look at and you say, boy, Jesus talking about this master, man, he was pretty tough on that last servant. I mean, he gave him 1 talent. At least he got his talent back, But what did the master called him? Wicked. Called him lazy, and he got on him pretty heavy. Now, there's a few things I want to point out about this story that I think we can learn, and I know this has been an awful lot to me as I do business as a Christian, and I think that you should consider this as well. A few things here I want to point out. One, we're given different starting positions. Some of us are born in abundance. Some of us may have had 5 talents, baby. Like that guy. I mean, maybe the others are born into scarcity. Maybe he had 1 talent. But what matters isn't what we're given. It's what we do with it that matters. I believe that this is what Jesus is teaching in this parable. Jesus acknowledges the unfairness of life. Not everybody is the same. Not everybody starts out in the same place. But he also suggests that our starting conditions are irrelevant. One person earns 5 talents, another 2. Both are congratulated equally. the master said the same thing to them because they both achieved, they doubled what they had. This is also a good lesson, I think, in dealing with other human beings. We should deal with people based on their starting positions. Evaluate yourself by your own starting position. If you happen to be one of those who receive 5 talents, you shouldn't be patting yourself on the back. You already have above average opportunity. If you have abundant talents, you should expect even more for yourself. Similarly, there may be times in your life when you only have 1 talent, and you need to do your best and do the best you can with it. So even though the gains appear small from an external standard, I believe by Jesus' standard, you've actually made a notable accomplishment. Another interesting thing about the parable I want to point out is the parable of the talents. The parable is that the talents are entrusted to us like a master putting money into the care of the servants. We're stewards of our wealth. I define wealth very loosely here. I don't mean just money, well beyond material possessions. For example, if I can write and if I can speak fairly well and those talents are entrusted to me, now I'm away from the money talent, right? Now I'm on the ability talent. And I think both of them apply here. I do. I think, you can bury these talents if you're good at speaking or writing. You can choose to bury those talents in the dirt or out of fear. Or you can come out of your shell and strive to create an increase for everybody and share that talent for the benefit of everybody in the community. One thing I wonder about the parable, what would have happened if one of the servants who invested the money realized a loss instead of a gain? I wonder about that. Now, one of the things that you may agree or disagree, but the one thing that I find is that the master in this story rewarded those who overcame their fear. What did the one guy with the 1 talent do? He was afraid, wasn't he? He said, I know you're a hard man, and I didn't want to disappoint you, and I didn't want to. So I hid your talent, and here it is back. Look, I brought it back to you. And Jesus called him wicked, called him lazy. Okay, well, so it's an issue, I think, of trust, overcoming fear, and faith. And I think that's something that, as we go through this parable of the talents, many times when I've heard pastors and different folks talk about it, I think that's something that they miss. I think the clue is how Jesus would have answered that wicked, lazy servant. Later, the master refers to that servant as worthless and physically throws him out, if you remember. And that's pretty harsh language, I'd agree, because the servant did give the master his money back. So I think Jesus is saying that inaction is wicked, and that inaction, I believe, in other words, if you do nothing with your talents, if you hide them under a rock or in the ground, if you hoard them, you're choosing to be wicked, lazy, and worthless. That's hard words, harsh words, but I think that this is the point here. You're supposed to invest what you've been given. And what I mean by invest, I mean if you have talents, you should use those talents for God's glory and the ongoing and expansion of His kingdom. We as Christians, don't be lazy. And I think you say, well, one of the things that I think we have sometimes, Christians have a tendency to be very complacent. We know we've got a bus ticket to heaven. Our souls have been saved because we've entrusted our soul and our future, and we're committed to Jesus Christ, and we are His. We are children of the King. However, another clue is that first servant was praised, the master praised for being faithful. I find that very interesting that he praised him for being faithful. Faith, the root word of faithful. So I believe he praised them for having faith, for overcoming fear. One of the things when I was growing up, let me mention this. The praise is given for the faith, I believe, and for overcoming fear, not the results. Now, you may disagree with me, but this is what I get out of this parable. And again, this is my opinion and my conclusion as derived from the text and the different what do you call them, commentaries that I've read concerning this parable, because I find it fascinating and I find it very interesting. And I think we as Christians, it teaches us a whole lot more than just what you might see on the surface. I conclude that if one of the servants had invested the money and lost some of it, I conclude that they still would have been praised for their faithfulness. Now, you may disagree, but I think Jesus doesn't directly address the condition in the parable, but by suggesting that faith itself is the path to success, a common theme of other teachings. So perhaps if you use your talents faithfully, you really aren't going to lose. Okay. Again, that's my take on the text and my opinion. There's another thing I want to mention. Another quality of the parable, and I think something you can extract from it, is the lack of competition. The servants aren't competing with each other for their master's favor. It's not a zero-sum game. The first two servants both contribute something of value to the master's estate. What's the ultimate reward for the faithful servants? Well, Jesus doesn't explicitly say this, but it seems obvious to me that they don't get to keep their money. But the two successful servants aren't working for their own increase. It's not their money. They're working for the increase of their master, and they share in the increase of his estate. Their true reward is to share in the master's happiness. So happiness is the reward, and happiness comes from serving others. I think that's something else that we can glean from this. You know, I know from my own experience, and I know you as a Christian feel the same way, that when you undertake an action that creates an increase only for yourself, there's not very much gratification to that, is there? You know, you don't spend a lot of energy doing it, you know. You actually, but if you focus creating an increase for others, such as helping people to grow spiritually, however, financially, whatever, you feel great joy in doing that, and it ultimately increases for you too, for me too. In other words, I think when we help others, that's true happiness, and that's how we're going to ultimately be happy here on this earth as we serve and do for others. Happiness is a quality that I try to inject into my work, and not something I derive from it, if that makes sense. When I work for myself, I'm looking for happiness outside of myself, and trying to achieve happiness that way typically doesn't work very well. When I work for others' benefit, when I quit worrying about what's in it for me, many times that's when I tap into this well of happiness that is really already inside of us as Christians, and instead of trying to achieve happiness, I happily achieve. So happiness flows outward from me and the work that I do, and I experience it as an outflow, not an inflow, if that makes any sense to you at all. Hopefully it does. In other words, happiness for us as Christians, I believe, is the Spirit of God that flows through us. Happiness is something that we breathe out, that we exhale, for lack of a better word. It's not something you breathe in or take in. It's actually something that you pass on through the Holy Spirit and through our relationship with God through Jesus. And you know, I don't know. It's you know, I also believe that Jesus implies through this parable that creating abundance requires us to move beyond fear. And I think some fear and some concern many times is sort of our watchdog. But too much fear and suspicion or distrust, you're going to bury your talents. And I think this can lead to weeping and gnashing of teeth, as the text talks about it, sorrow and depression. So you might think that fear and suspicion will keep us out of trouble, but really they'll many times cause us suffering and pain. You don't need to fear to avoid being a gullible idiot. You don't need that. You're making bad decisions are something that we all have the capacity to do, whether we're Christian or not. However, using common sense, living life in abundance, and I think we must ultimately move beyond fear to create abundance for others. And that's really what I'm talking about. if you don't, I think otherwise, if we're afraid of everything that comes up, if we fear everything, if we're scared of our shadow, if we're worried to death, Jesus doesn't pull any punches. He says, ultimately we're worthless here and that we're basically bums. So, remember this, and I think this is a great thing to remember for us as Christians. We don't own. I own this, and this is mine, and this is that. Not really. We misspeak when we say that. We don't own, we oversee. And my hope for you as a Christian is that you'll continue to find happiness and joy in those things that you can do for other people, and being a good steward for those things that God has temporarily entrusted us with here on this earth, and that you can continue to move forward and increase for others. Happiness will be your rewards. Bear your talent, and I think there's going to be weeping and gnashing of teeth. But of course, the choice and the point as the outcome to an extent is certainly up to us and the decisions that we make. So that's what I've got here today, and I felt compelled every now and again. I want to dust off that commentary that I've sort of put together on the parable of the talents. There's a lot of other things there just in that text that I'd like to pull out and talk to you about. And I think it's a wonderful thing that the good Maker's given us and allowing us to think. God's given us an awful lot of wonderful powers. He's given us the power to think, to feel, to pray, to curse, to act, to procrastinate. But I believe that the biggest power God has given us is in the ability to choose whether we're going to plan or procrastinate, or plan or not plan, or act or procrastinate, and do or not do. So anyway, hopefully today it's been a little different financial show, I know, than usually than I bring to you. I'm usually talking about technical investments and different stuff, but today I wanted to share with you this biblical truth, and I felt compelled. And it's my prayer that you and your family will continue to go and grow in Christ. If you don't know Jesus as your Savior, I'd encourage you to, you can call us, send us an email. We'll be glad to talk with you about your spiritual growth as well as your financial growth. And it would be an honor and a privilege to talk to you about such things. So hope everybody has a wonderful, safe, happy weekend. I hope everybody has a little money to spend, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend with family and friends, and I wish you the best. So again, have any questions, send us an email, rstory@storywealth.com. Call us on the phone if you'd like, 912-384-0030, and we'll look forward to hearing from you. And again, go in and sign up for those seminars. I think you'll be glad you did. Y'all have a great weekend. God bless.